The wind carried dust like whispers across the plains. It rolled low and restless through the dry grass, brushing against the bones of an unforgiving land. The sky stretched endlessly above, pale blue and merciless, as if it had forgotten how to rain. Somewhere in the distance, a lone hawk circled, watching, waiting, and beneath that sky rode a man who belonged to it. Caleb Rourke didn't hurry. He never did. His horse, an iron gray stallion named Ghost, moved with a steady, knowing rhythm, hooves pressing into the dirt road like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Caleb sat tall in the saddle, hat low over his eyes, the sun catching the edge of his stubbled jaw. People in these parts knew him, not because he talked much, but because when trouble came, he didn't ride away from it, he rode straight into it. The town of Dry Hollow came into view just past a ridge, small, sun-baked, and worn down to its bones. A cluster of wooden buildings leaning against time itself. A saloon with swinging doors that never quite closed. A general store with faded paint. A sheriff's office that looked more like a suggestion than authority, and people, always watching. They noticed Caleb the moment he rode in. They always did. A couple of men. Outside, the saloon stopped mid-conversation. A woman pulling laundry from a line froze, squinting through the heat haze. Even the piano inside the saloon faltered for half a beat, like the player had felt something shift in the air. Caleb didn't look at any of them. He guided Ghost down the main street, calm and quiet, until he reached the hitching post outside the saloon. But before he could dismount, a voice cut through the heat, sharp, angry. "And what exactly do you expect her to do, Marshal? Dig wells with her bare hands?" Caleb paused, slowly turned his head. The voice came from near the sheriff's office. A small crowd had gathered, never a good sign in a place like Dry Hollow. He slid off Ghost in one smooth motion, tied the reins, and walked toward the commotion, boots crunching against gravel. By the time he reached the edge of the crowd, the argument had only gotten louder. "You don't get to pick and choose," barked Sheriff Dalton, a heavy-set man with sweat staining his collar. "She's got no family, no money, no claim to anything in this town, and that means you work her to death." The other voice shot back. Caleb pushed through the crowd, and that's when he saw her. She stood there in the dust, shoulders squared despite everything pressing against her. Her dress was worn, torn at the edges, like it had traveled far too many miles. Dark hair clung to her face from sweat, but her eyes burned. Not with fear, with defiance. "I didn't ask for charity," she said, voice steady despite the tremor underneath. "But I won't be treated like livestock either." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Dalton scoffed. "You're lucky we're offering you work at all." "What kind of work?" she demanded. "Whatever needs doing. Fields, fences, hauling. You eat if you earn it." "That's not work," she said quietly. "That's punishment." The tension tightened like a drawn wire. Caleb watched her carefully. Most people in her position would have folded by now, but she didn't. She stood her ground, even with the whole town watching, judging. That told him something. Something important. Sheriff Dalton took a step closer, lowering his voice, though everyone could still hear it. "You don't have choices, girl." That's when Caleb spoke. "Yes, she does." The words weren't loud, but they cut through the air like a gunshot. Every head turned. Dalton's jaw tightened. "Rourke, this ain't your business." Caleb stepped forward, calm as ever. "Seems like it just became my business." He looked at the woman, really looked at her this time. Dust-covered, exhausted, but unbroken. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then, quietly, "Eliza." Caleb nodded once, like that was all he needed. He turned back to the sheriff. "You're saying she's got no place to go?" "That's right. No work lined up?" "Nope." Caleb adjusted his hat slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to show he was thinking. "Then she can come work my ranch." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Dalton let out a short, humorless laugh. "Your ranch? Since when do you take in strays?" Caleb didn't react. Since now, Dalton's eyes flicked between them. And what exactly would she be doing out there? Caleb glanced at Eliza again. And something shifted. Not pity, not obligation, something Quieter, stronger, she'll choose, he said. The words hung in the air, confused, unexpected, dangerous. Dalton frowned. Choose what? What work she wants to do, Caleb replied simply. What kind of life she builds. That ain't how things work out here, Dalton snapped. Caleb's gaze hardened, just a fraction. Maybe it should be. Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Eliza stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. Why? She asked softly. It wasn't suspicion. It was something deeper, like she didn't trust kindness anymore. Caleb held her gaze for a long moment. He didn't answer. Then, because no one should be forced into a life they didn't choose. Something in his voice made the air feel heavier, like those words meant more than he was saying. Eliza swallowed. You don't even know me. Don't need to, he said. That's a mistake. May, a faint ghost of a smile touched his lips. But it'll be mine to make. She studied him carefully, like she was trying to see through him, through the quiet strength, through the calm, through whatever ghosts he carried behind those steady eyes. Finally, she nodded. All right, she said. I'll come, Dalton scoffed. You'll regret this, Rourke. Caleb didn't even look at him. Wouldn't be the first time. He turned, heading back toward his horse. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza followed. The crowd parted for them, whispers trailing behind like smoke. She won't last a week. Rourke's gone soft, or stupid. Neither of them responded. Caleb untied Ghost and mounted in one fluid motion. Then he looked down at her. You ride? Eliza hesitated. A little. He extended a hand. Then, let's see how much you remember. She looked at his hand, then up at him, and for just a second something like hope flickered in her eyes. She took it. Caleb pulled her up behind him, steady and sure, and just like that they rode out of Dry Hollow, into the open land, into something neither of them fully understood. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains as Ghost carried them forward. Eliza held onto the back of the saddle, at first, careful not to touch him, but as the wind picked up, as the town disappeared behind them, as the world opened wide and uncertain, her hand shifted, just slightly, resting against his coat. Caleb noticed, but he didn't say anything, didn't move, didn't break the moment, because something had already begun, something quiet, something dangerous, and neither of them knew yet that before long, the choice he'd offered her would come at a cost neither of them were ready to pay. The land changed as they rode. Dry Hollow disappeared behind them like a bad memory, swallowed by distance and dust. Out here, the world opened wide, rolling plains stretching into the horizon, broken only by clusters of mesquite trees and the occasional jagged ridge. The wind was stronger here, cleaner, honest. Eliza noticed it first. This doesn't feel like the same world, she said quietly, her voice nearly carried off by the breeze. Caleb didn't turn back, but his voice reached her just the same. It isn't. She frowned slightly. It's still the same land. No, he said. Towns where people pretend. Out here. He paused, letting Ghost slow slightly as the terrain shifted upward. Out here, things are what they are. Eliza let that settle. Her hand still rested lightly against his back, not out of comfort, but necessity. Or at least, that's what she told herself. The truth was more complicated. She hadn't trusted anyone in a long time, and yet something about this man made her feel like she didn't have to be on guard every second. That alone made her uneasy. The ranch they reached it just before sundown. Caleb's ranch wasn't grand. It wasn't the kind of place that boasted wealth or power, but it was strong, built to last. A wide stretch of fenced land, weathered barns, a modest house sitting slightly elevated on a slope like it had learned to stand its ground against storms. A few horses grazed in the distance. A couple of ranch hands stopped their work as Caleb rode in. One of them, a tall man with a crooked grin, raised a brow. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Boss brought company. Caleb dismounted first, then turned to help Eliza down. His hands were firm, steady, but careful. Always careful. That's Thomas, Caleb said, nodding toward the man approaching them. Talks too much, Thomas chuckled. Only when there's something worth talking about. His eyes flicked to Eliza, curious but not unkind. And who might you be? Eliza, she said simply. Thomas tipped his hat. Welcome to the middle of nowhere, Miss Eliza. She gave the faintest hint of a smile. It surprised even her. That night, after a simple supper of beans, bread, and silence broken only by quiet conversation, Caleb stepped outside. Eliza followed. The sky above was endless, filled with stars like she'd never seen before. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Caleb said, "Tomorrow, you'll decide what you want to do." She crossed her arms. "You keep saying that, like it's that simple, is." "No," she said, turning to face him. "It's not. People like me don't get to choose." Caleb studied her. There it was again. That edge in her voice, like every word had been sharpened by something painful. "You're not in dry hollow anymore," he said. "That doesn't change who I am." "No," he agreed. "But it changes what's in front of you." She looked away. The stars reflected faintly in her eyes. "What if I choose wrong?" she asked, softer now. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Then you choose again." That answer hit her harder than she expected, because no one had ever said that to her before. Not once. The first morning dawn came early. Too early. Eliza woke to the sound of movement. Outside, the creak of wood, the distant whinny of horses, boots against dirt. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it all came back. The town, the argument, him. She sat up slowly, wincing slightly at the stiffness in her body. Travel had taken its toll, but there was something else too, strange anticipation. She stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth and hay. Caleb stood near the corral, adjusting a saddle. He glanced up as she approached. "You're up early," she raised a brow. "You say that like I had a choice." A faint smirk touched his lips. "There's always a choice." She rolled her eyes slightly, but didn't argue. Instead, she looked around. "So," she said, "what are my options?" Caleb gestured toward the land. "Everything you see." "That's not helpful." He walked toward her, stopping just close enough that she could feel his presence, but not enough to feel trapped. "You can work the fields, tend the horses, help in the house, ride with us, or..." He paused. "You can leave." She blinked. "You just let me go? If that's what you want." Eliza stared at him, trying to understand him. Most men wanted control, expected obedience, but him? He kept handing her something she didn't know how to hold. Freedom. And it terrified her more than anything else. "I'll stay," she said finally. Caleb nodded once. "Then what'll it be?" She looked toward the horses. They moved with quiet strength, muscles shifting under sunlit coats. "I want to learn that," she said. Caleb followed her gaze. A small flicker of approval crossed his face. "Then we start there, learning to death." First time she tried, she nearly fell. The second time she did fall. Thomas laughed from the fence. "You're gonna want to hold on tighter than that." Eliza shot him a glare from the dirt. "I noticed." Caleb didn't laugh. He stepped forward, offering a hand. She hesitated, then took it, again, and again, and again. Each fall stung less. Each attempt lasted longer. By midday, she was still unsteady, but she stayed on, barely. "That's it," Caleb said calmly, walking beside the horse. "Don't fight it. Move with her." "With her?" Eliza muttered. "She's trying to kill me." Caleb almost smiled. "No, she's testing you." Eliza exhaled, adjusting her grip. Slowly, carefully, she found a rhythm. Not perfect, not graceful, but real. When she finally guided the horse forward, on her own just a few steps, she let out a breathless laugh. And for the first time, Caleb saw her not as someone surviving, but someone living. Days turned into a rhythm. Mornings in the saddle, afternoons learning the land, evenings under the open sky. Eliza changed. Not all at once, but little by Little, she stood taller, spoke easier, laughed sometimes, without catching herself, and Caleb he watched, quietly, always quietly. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, they rode side by side along the ridge. "You're learning fast," he said. She glanced at him. "You're a good teacher. I don't talk much." "That helps." He huffed a quiet laugh. Then silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable. After a while, Eliza spoke. "You still haven't told me why." Caleb didn't look at her. "Why what?" "Why you helped me." He considered that. The wind brushed past them, carrying something unspoken. "Finally you knew someone once," he said. "Didn't get a choice." Eliza's chest tightened. "What happened to them?" Caleb's jaw shifted slightly. "They paid for it." That was all he said. But it was enough. Because in that moment Eliza realized something. The man who gave her freedom was still haunted by someone who never had it. The first shadow that night, long after the ranch had gone quiet, Eliza stepped outside. Something had woken her. A sound, distant, faint. She moved carefully toward the edge of the property, and then she saw it, far off. Near the horizon, a flicker of light. Then, another. Campfires. Too many to be travelers. Her breath caught, and then a shape moved in the distance. Riders. Watching, waiting. Eliza's heart began to pound. Behind her, a voice cut through the dark. Low, dangerous. "You shouldn't be out here alone." She turned sharply. Caleb stood there, eyes fixed on the distant lights. His expression had changed. Gone was the calm. Gone was the quiet ease. What remained was something harder. Something Ray. Eliza swallowed. "Who are they?" Caleb didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed locked on the horizon, and when he finally spoke, his voice was colder than she'd ever heard it. "Trouble," he said. A long pause. Then, "And it just found us." The fires on the horizon didn't disappear. They burned low through the night like a warning. The land itself refused to silence. Eliza didn't sleep after that. She sat by the window in the small room Caleb had given her, watching the darkness stretch and shift. Every flicker of shadow felt like movement. Every creak of wood made her chest tighten. By the time dawn came, she already knew something had changed, and so did Caleb. Morning without peace. The ranch woke earlier than usual. Men moved faster. Voices stayed low. Even the horses seemed restless, stamping the ground like they could feel what was coming. Thomas was the first to speak it out loud. "You gonna tell us who they are?" he asked. Leaning against the corral fence, arms crossed, Caleb tightened a strap on his saddle, his movements precise. "I don't know yet," he said. Thomas scoffed. "That many riders? That ain't a maybe. That's a message." Caleb didn't respond, but Eliza saw it. The tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw locked, just slightly. He knew more than he was saying, and that scared her more than the riders themselves. The name that changes everything. It was just past midday when the message came. A single rider approached the ranch, slow, deliberate, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Caleb stepped out to meet him before he reached the house. Eliza followed at a distance, heart pounding. The man dismounted casually, dust falling from his coat. He wasn't nervous. That meant he was either a fool or dangerous. "Caleb Rourke," the man said with a crooked smile. "Didn't think you'd settle down like this." Caleb's voice was flat. "State your business," the man chuckled. "Straight to it." Still the same. He reached into his coat slowly, carefully, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Message," he said. "From someone who remembers you." Caleb didn't take it. "Say it." The man's smile widened. "Silas Kane." The name hit like thunder. Thomas froze. Eliza felt the shift immediately, even without knowing who that was, because Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe, for just a second, and in that second, something dark surfaced in his eyes. Something old. Something dangerous. "A ghost returns." "Read it," Caleb said quietly. The rider unfolded the paper, clearing his throat. "You built yourself a quiet little life, Rourke. That's real nice. Shame if something were to disturb it." He paused, glancing up. I'll be paying you a visit soon. Thought you'd like some time to remember who you used to be." The wind picked up slightly, brushing dust between them. Silas came. Silence followed. Heavy, unforgiving. Then Caleb stepped forward, his presence suddenly sharper. "Tell him this," he said, voice low. "I'm not that man anymore." The rider smirked. "He figured you'd say that, and he don't care." The man mounted his horse again, adjusting his hat. "He'll be here by nightfall tomorrow." And then he rode off, just like that, leaving something far worse behind. The moment the rider disappeared over the ridge, Thomas turned to Caleb. "You better start talking," he said. Caleb didn't answer right away. He stared out at the horizon, the same direction. The fires had burned the night before. Then, he exhaled slowly. "Silas Kane," he said, "used to run with me." Eliza stepped closer. "What does that mean?" Caleb finally looked at her, and this time there was no distance in his eyes. "An oh quiet shield. Just truth." "It means," he said, "I wasn't always a rancher." Thomas muttered under his breath. "That's one way to put it." Caleb ignored him. "I rode with the gang," he continued. "Years ago, we robbed trains, stagecoaches, towns that couldn't defend themselves." Eliza's breath caught. "You were an outlaw." "Yes." The word came without hesitation, without excuse, and somehow that made it worse. "Silas led us," Caleb said, "and he didn't believe in stopping." Thomas added quietly, "Or mercy." Eliza looked between them. "Then why did you leave?" Caleb's gaze darkened. "Because one day," he said, "he decided we weren't just taking from people anymore." Pause. "He started killing them." The air felt colder. "What did you do?" Eliza asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. His silence spoke first, then tried to stop him. A past written in blood. Thomas picked up where Caleb didn't. "They turned on him," he said. "Left him for dead." Eliza's eyes widened slightly. "But you didn't die." Caleb shook his head. "Someone found me. Gave me a second chance." His voice softened just a fraction. "I didn't deserve it." Eliza stepped closer. "But you took it." Caleb met her gaze. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I did." Fear takes root. Ranch didn't feel the same anymore. Not to Eliza. Every fence post, every open field, every quiet corner now felt exposed, vulnerable. She found Caleb near the barn that evening, checking supplies. "You're preparing for a fight," she said. He didn't deny it. "He's not coming to talk." "No," she said. "He's coming for you." Caleb paused, then shook his head slightly. "He's coming for everything." Eliza's chest tightened. "This is because of me, isn't it?" That made him turn. Fully. "Oh, you took me in," she said. "You made yourself visible." Eliza, her name stopped her, firm, certain. "This has nothing to do with you." "But it does," she insisted. "People like him, they look for weakness. And you gave him one." Caleb stepped closer. "You're not a weakness." The words landed hard. Too hard. Eliza shook her head. "You don't know that." "I do." "How?" "Because I've seen what you do when things get hard." A beat. "You don't break." Something in her expression shifted. But fear still lingered. "What if this time I do?" she asked softly. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be there when you fall." The line drawn that night. The ranch gathered. Weapons were cleaned. Plans were made. Thomas leaned over a crude map scratched into the table. "They'll come from the ridge," he said. "Same place we saw the fires." Caleb nodded. "We hold them there. Don't let them reach the house." "And if they do?" Caleb's voice hardened. "They won't." Eliza stood in the corner, watching, listening, realizing something terrifying. This wasn't just a fight. This was a reckoning. And Caleb was right at the center of it. The choice returned later. As the others settled in for what little rest they could find, Caleb found Eliza outside again. "You should leave," he said. She turned sharply. "No, you still have time." "Not running. This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment I stayed." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Eliza, no," she said, stepping closer. "You told me I get to choose, remember?" A beat. Well, I'm choosing this. Silence stretched between them, heavy. Then Caleb nodded. Once. All right. But his eyes said something else, something she didn't understand yet. The storm arrived next. Evening they came, not quietly, not carefully, but like a storm rolling across the land. Dust rose in the distance first, then shapes, then riders, a dozen, me more. At the front a man rode ahead of the rest, tall, still like he owned the land beneath him. Even from a distance Eliza felt it. The danger, the weight of him. That's him, Thomas muttered. Caleb didn't move, didn't blink. Silas came. The riders slowed just outside rifle range, watching, waiting. Then Silas raised a hand and the entire group stopped. Perfect, like they were extensions of him. He leaned forward, slightly in his saddle, and, even across the distance his voice carried, "Rourke," he called. "You gotta hide behind fences now?" Caleb stepped forward. "Alone? I'm right here." Silas smiled, cold, amused. "I see that." His eyes flicked across the ranch, the men, the house, and then they landed on Eliza, and something in that smile changed. Interested. "Well now," Silas said slowly, "that's new." Caleb's voice dropped. "Dangerous, don't." Silas chuckled. "Seems you built yourself more than just a ranch." The tension snapped tight, like a wire ready to break, and then Silas leaned back in his saddle, still smiling. "This is gonna be fun." The air felt different when night fell, heavier, like the land itself knew something was about to be broken. Silas Kane and his men hadn't attacked. Not yet. They'd made camp just beyond the ridge, close enough to be seen, far enough to stay out of reach, waiting, watching, playing a game Caleb understood all too well. "They're not here to rush us," Thomas muttered, staring into the distance. "They want us tired, nervous." Caleb stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the flickering fires. "No," he said quietly. "Silas wants me to come to him." Eliza, standing just behind them, felt a chill crawl down her spine. "Why?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer, but Thomas did. "Because men like Silas don't just want blood," he said. "They want control." Pause. "They want to prove something." Eliza looked at Caleb. "And what's he trying to prove with you?" Caleb's voice was low. "That I never changed." The weight of who he was. Later that night, Eliza found Caleb sitting alone near the corral. The horses were restless, shifting under the moonlight. The wind carried the scent of dust and something else, something like inevitability. "You're thinking about going to him," she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't deny it. "He won't stop," he said. "Not until he gets what he came for." "And what is that?" Caleb looked up at me. The word landed hard. Eliza stepped closer. "Then let him try. It's not that simple." "Why not?" she demanded. "We have men. We can defend. This isn't a fight we win by waiting." He cut in. His tone wasn't harsh, but it was final. "Eliza, I know him. He'll keep pushing, burning, killing, until I step out." Her chest tightened. "So you're just going to give yourself up?" Caleb stood slowly, meeting her gaze. "If it keeps the rest of you alive, yes. The break, no." The word came sharp, immediate. Eliza shook her head, stepping back like the very idea offended her. "No, you don't get to do that." Caleb frowned slightly. "It's not about what I get, it is," she snapped. "You're choosing to leave. To sacrifice yourself like that makes everything right. It's the only way, it's the easiest way." She fired back. The words hit harder than anything else. Caleb went still. "Eliza, you think dying fixes what you were?" she continued, voice trembling now. "You think it makes up for your past?" His jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I understand exactly." Silence fell between them, heavy, sharp. "You're running," she whispered. "That did it." Caleb's voice dropped. "Colder now." "I don't run." "Then what do you call this?" she demanded. "Walking into his hands? Leaving everything behind?" A beat. "Leaving me?" The words lingered, raw, unprotected, and, for the first time Caleb didn't have an answer ready. What? They don't say the distance between them felt wider than the plains. Eliza turned away. First, because if she stayed, she wasn't sure what she'd say next, or how much it would hurt. You told me I could choose, she said quietly, her back still to him. Caleb didn't move. I did. Her hands clenched at her sides. Well, didn't choose this, she said. I didn't choose to care about someone who thinks the only way to protect people is to disappear. Her voice cracked on the last word, and that broke something in him. Eliza, but she shook her head. No, she turned, eyes shining but fierce. If you walk out to him, don't expect me to stand here and wait for you to die. The words cut deep, because they weren't a threat, they were truth. And then she walked away, leaving Caleb alone in the dark. Dangerous. Offerth next morning came too fast, and with it a white flag. One of Silas's men rode up slowly, unarmed, hands visible. I've got a message, he called. Caleb stepped forward before anyone else could speak. The man smirked slightly. Silas says he's feeling generous, Thomas muttered under his breath. That's never good. The rider continued. He'll give you a trade. Caleb's expression didn't change. What kind of trade? The man's eyes flicked toward the house, toward Eliza, and then back. One life for another. The world seemed to stop. Eliza stepped forward slowly. What does that mean? She asked. The rider's smile widened. It means, he said, you come with us. A pause, and he lets the rest of this ranch live. Thomas swore under his breath. Caleb's voice dropped. Lethal. No. The answer came instantly, but Eliza, she didn't speak. Not yet. The choice no one expected that night. The ranch was quieter than it had ever been. Not peaceful, just waiting. Eliza sat alone inside, staring at nothing, turning the words over and over in her mind. One life for another. She stood slowly, stepped outside, and found Caleb near the fence line. Again, you're not considering it, he said before she even spoke. She didn't deny it. Caleb turned sharply. Eliza, no, you were ready to do the same thing, she said. That's different. How? She challenged. Because it's my past, he said. My fight. And now it's mine too. His voice hardened. Not like this. Eliza stepped closer. You told me I get to choose. A long silence. The same words, but now, they felt heavier. Dangerous. You don't get to use that against me, Caleb said quietly. I'm not, she replied. I'm using it for myself. Their eyes locked, and everything unsaid between them rose to the surface. Fear. Trust. Something deeper. Something neither of them had named yet. If I go, she said softly, they leave you alone. They won't, Caleb said immediately. Silas doesn't keep deals. You don't know that. I do. A beat. I used to be one of them. That silenced her, but not completely. Then what's the plan? She asked. We just wait until they attack? Until someone dies? Caleb didn't answer, because there was no good answer. The truth finally spoke in. Eliza's voice softened. Just slightly. You can't protect everyone, she said. Caleb's gaze dropped for a moment. I have to try, she said gently. You want to. Pause. Because you couldn't before. The words landed carefully this time. Not like an accusation, like understanding. Caleb looked at her again. And this time, there was no wall between them, just truth. I lost people, he said quietly. Good people. Eliza stepped closer. So don't lose more, she said. Their voices dropped into something softer now, something real. And if I lose you? He asked. The question hung there, unprotected, honest. Eliza's breath caught, and in that moment everything became clear. The moment that changes everything. She reached for him first. Not carefully, not cautiously, but like she'd already decided. Her hand found his shirt, pulling him closer, and then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't perfect. It was everything they hadn't said. Fear, anger, hope, and something far deeper than either of them had allowed themselves to feel. Caleb froze for half a second, then pulled her closer, like letting go would break something he couldn't fix. When they finally separated, neither of them stepped back. "You don't get to leave me," Eliza whispered. His forehead rested lightly against hers. "And you don't get to sacrifice yourself for me," he replied. A beat. "So what does that leave us?" Caleb's eyes darkened slightly. "Something harder." The cliff before the fall. The next morning, the sun rose red, like the sky itself knew what was coming. Silas and his men were already mounted, waiting. This time, there would be no more messages and no more offers. Just action. Caleb stood at the front of the ranch, gun at his side. Eliza beside him. Not behind. Never behind. Thomas and the others took their positions. The wind picked up, dust swirling across the ground like a warning. Silas raised a hand slowly and smiled. "Time's up, Rourke." Caleb didn't move. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Is." Silas's hand dropped. And in that instant everything exploded. The first shot shattered the morning. It cracked through the air like lightning, splitting the sky, sharp, violent, final. Then came the rest. Gunfire erupted from both sides, echoing across the plains in a deafening storm. Horses reared, men shouted. Bullets tore through wood and dirt, kicking up clouds of dust that turned the world into chaos. Eliza flinched but didn't freeze. Inside, Thomas shouted, "No!" She yelled back, gripping the rifle Caleb had given her. She took position behind the fence, just like he'd shown her. And then she fired. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but she held her ground. Across the field, one of Silas's riders dropped from his horse. Her breath caught. She had done that. There was no time to think about it. Another shot rang out. Closer. Caleb unleashed. Cold moved like a man who had been here before. Because he had. Every motion was sharp, controlled, deadly. He fired once, hit. Twice another rider fell. He reloaded without looking, stepping forward instead of back. Always forward. "Eliza, stay low," he called, but his eyes never left the enemy. Silas's men pushed hard, spreading wide, trying to flank the ranch. "They're splitting," Thomas shouted, "trying to surround us." Caleb saw it too, and he knew this wasn't just a raid. It was a hunt, and Silas was the one leading it. Face to face through the smoke and dust, Caleb saw him. Silas came, rode straight through the chaos, and touched by it like the storm itself bent around him. Caleb's expression darkened. "This ends now," he muttered. He moved without hesitation, vaulting over the fence, landing hard in the dirt beyond. "Caleb?" Eliza shouted. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because this had always been between them. The heart of the fight. Silas slowed his horse as Caleb approached, sliding off the saddle with deliberate ease. Gunfire still raged around them, but for a moment it felt like the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Well," Silas said, a grin spreading across his face. "There he is." Caleb's voice was cold. "It ends here," Silas chuckled. "You always were dramatic." He stepped closer, gleaming. "You really built all this?" he asked, glancing toward the ranch. "Fences, horses, a little life pretending you're not what you are." Caleb didn't respond, because he knew words wouldn't change this. Silas tilted his head slightly. "And the girl," he added. "That's new." Caleb's hand tightened on his gun. "Don't." Silas smirked. "Ah, so that's your weakness." "She's not, she is," Silas interrupted smoothly. "Because you care. A beat. And that makes you predictable." The duel begins. They drew at the same time. Two shots rang out almost as one. Caleb staggered slightly, a graze across his arm. Silas didn't fall, but his smile faded just a little. "Good," he said, voice darker now. "I was hoping you hadn't gone soft." They circled each other slowly, boots grinding into dust. "You could have stayed," Silas said. "Had everything." "I saw what everything meant to you," Caleb replied. "And you think this is better?" Silas gestured toward the ranch. "Hard work, small life, constant fear." Caleb's voice steadied. "It's honest." Silas laughed. "Honest gets you killed." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but it lets you live first." Something flickered in Silas's eyes. Gone in an instant. Then they fired again. Eliza's fight back at the ranch. Things were falling apart. They're breaking through, Thomas shouted. 2 riders had made it past the fence, charging toward the house. Eliza's heart pounded. She raised her rifle, hands shaking, and fired. Missed. The rider kept coming. Closer. Too close. She fumbled to reload. The sound of hooves thundered in her ears, and then a shot rang out beside her. The rider dropped. Eliza turned. Thomas stood there, lowering his gun. "You hesitate, you die," he said sharply. "Remember that." She swallowed hard, then nodded, and picked up her rifle again. Everything falls. Apathy. Battle stretched on too long, too brutal. Men were down on both sides. The ranch was holding barely, and in the center of it all Caleb and Silas kept fighting, shot after shot, step after step, like neither of them could stop until one of them wasn't standing anymore. The moment that changes everything. Then it happened. Eliza saw it from across the field. A man, one of Silas's, had broken away from the fight. He wasn't aiming at the ranch. He wasn't aiming at Thomas. He was aiming at Caleb. From behind. Her breath caught. Caleb. But he didn't hear her. He was focused on Silas, on the fight in front of him, not the danger behind. Time slowed. Eliza didn't think, didn't hesitate. She ran. Across open ground. Gunfire ripping through the air around her. "Eliza, no!" Thomas shouted, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. Because she saw it, the outlaw pulling the trigger, the gun lifting, the shot about to fire. The choices raised. Her rifle fired at the same moment the outlaw did. 2 shots echoed. One body fell, but not his. Eliza stumbled. The world tilted, and suddenly she couldn't feel her legs. Everything stopped. Caleb turned at the sound, and what he saw broke something inside him. Eliza. She was on the ground, blood spreading across her side, her rifle slipping from her hand. No, the word came out like a breath, like a prayer, like a denial of reality itself. Silas saw it too, and for the first time he didn't smile, because the look in Caleb's eyes was something else entirely. Not fear, not pain. Something deeper, something dangerous. The end of the past. Caleb turned back slowly. His face had changed. Completely. Silas exhaled once. There he is. Caleb didn't speak, didn't hesitate. He raised his gun, and this time, there was no dual .no circling .no waiting. Just a single shot. It hit Silas square in the chest. The impact threw him backward. He fell hard into the dust and didn't get back up. Silence followed. Slowly, the remaining riders pulled back, then fled. The storm was over. The cost. Caleb didn't watch them go. Didn't care. He dropped his gun and ran. Eliza. He fell to his knees beside her, hands pressing against the wound, trying to stop the blood. "Stay with me," he said, voice breaking for the first time. "Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, weak, but still there. "You didn't leave," she whispered. Caleb shook his head, his hands trembling. "Never," he said. "Not like that." A faint smile touched her lips. "Good." Her eyes began to close. "Eliza, no." Hey, look at me," he said desperately. "You don't get to do this. You hear me? You don't get to leave." Her breathing slowed, faded, and Caleb, for the first time in years, felt completely helpless. For a moment there was nothing. No wind. No voices. No sound of horses or men. Just silence. The kind that comes after something breaks so completely. The world forgets how to move. Caleb knelt in the dust, his hands pressed against Eliza's wound, blood slipping through his fingers no matter how hard he tried to hold it in place. "Stay with me," he whispered again, his voice raw, unsteady. "You hear me? You don't get to go." Thomas ran up beside him, breath heavy, eyes scanning the damage. "She hit bad," he said, already pulling off his coat. "We gotta move her now." Caleb didn't respond. He just stared at her face, pale, too still. "Alive," he said again, softer now. "You said you'd stay." Her lips parted slightly. A faint breath. So quiet it almost didn't exist. "I am," she whispered, barely there, but enough to pull him back from the edge, between life and loss. They carried her inside. Every step felt like it might be the one that ended. Everything, Thomas barked orders at the others, turning the main room into something between a shelter and a battlefield clinic. Hot water. Cloth clean, if you got it. Move, damn it, move. Caleb stayed at her side, didn't leave, didn't blink. Time stopped making sense. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. Her breathing was shallow and even, fading. And every second, he thought it might be the last. The man who couldn't fix this, I don't know if it's enough, Thomas said quietly, after what felt like hours. Caleb didn't look up. You've gotta rest, Thomas added. You're no good to her like this. I'm not leaving. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried something final. Thomas nodded slowly. All right, he said. Then stay. He placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. Firm, steady. He's still here, he said. That counts. Then he stepped back, giving them space. The long night fell again, but it didn't feel like the same world. The stars still hung overhead. The wind still moved across the plains, but inside that small house, everything held its breath. Caleb sat beside her bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. For the first time in years, he prayed, not out loud, not in words, but in that quiet, desperate way a man does when he knows he has nothing left to bargain with. I don't deserve this, he murmured after a while, his voice barely carried. I don't deserve her. Liza didn't respond, didn't move, and that silence, it cut deeper than any wound he'd ever taken. The choice she made just before dawn she stirred. It was small, barely noticeable, but Caleb saw it instantly. Liza, her eyes opened slowly, heavy, but alive. And in that moment, everything shifted. You're still here, she whispered. Caleb let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been whole. Yeah, he said, his voice breaking just slightly. So are you? A faint smile touched her lips. Told you. I choose. Her voice faded, but he understood. She chose to stay, not because she had to, not because she was forced, but because she wanted to. The days after recovery wasn't easy. Lying about it was. Some days, she couldn't sit up. Some days, she barely spoke, but she didn't slip away, and that was enough. Caleb stayed close through all of it, helping when she needed it, stepping back when she didn't, learning, slowly, how to be something he'd never been before. Not a protector, not a savior, just someone who stayed. A different kind of strength. Weeks passed, the ranch healed, broken fences were rebuilt, wounds physical and otherwise began to close, and Eliza, she stood again. The first time was shaky and uncertain. Caleb was there, just close enough to catch her if she fell, but she didn't. I'm not fragile, she said. Glancing at him, he nodded. I know. She took a few steps, slow, careful, but hers. You still get to choose, he added. Quietly, she looked at him. A long moment passed, and then she smiled. I know what comes next. Stone evening. As the sun dipped low across the plains, they stood side by side on the ridge overlooking the ranch, the same place where everything once felt uncertain. Now, it felt different, not easier, but clearer. You ever think about leaving? Eliza asked. Caleb considered that, then shook his head. No, she tilted her head slightly. Not even before me? A faint smile touched his lips. Especially before you. That made her laugh softly. Then she grew quiet again. What about now? Caleb looked at her. Really looked at her. Think, he said slowly. This is the first place that ever felt like something I chose. A pause. And not something I ran to. Eliza nodded. I understand that. The legend begins word spread. It always does. About the ranch that stood its ground. About the outlaw who came back from the past and ended it. About the woman who crossed a battlefield to save a man and lived. Some called it luck, others called it madness, but most called it something else. A story, the kind that gets told in saloons, passed from one voice to another, growing with each telling, becoming something bigger than the truth. The final moment the wind moved softly across the plains. The world stretched wide and endless before them. Caleb rested his hand lightly over Eliza's. Not pulling, just there. You still think I made a mistake? He asked quietly. She glanced up at him, a spark in her eyes. Taking me in? He nodded. She smiled. No, she said. Beat. I think you finally made a choice that mattered. Caleb exhaled slowly, and, for the first time, there was no weight behind it. No past pulling at him. No shadow waiting to catch up. Just this moment, this life, this choice, and her, the ending that stays out in the distance. The land rolled on forever, untamed, unforgiving, beautiful. And in that vast, endless world, two people stood side by side. Not because they had nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in their lives, they chose to stay.